Nigerians react as UN tells Buhari government to release Nnamdi Kanu. The directives by the United Nations to the federal government of Nigeria to release leader of indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, has stirred reactions online. Nigerian News had earlier reported that the UN Human Rights Council Working Group on arbitrary detention on Saturday ordered the President Muhammadu Buhari-led government to release Kanu. The Nigeria and Kenyan governments were condemned for the arrest, torture, and continued detention of Kanu without due process. The Buhari administration were also directed to pay the IPOB leader adequate compensations for the arbitrary violation of his fundamental human right. Kanu is currently in the detention of the DSS after being charged with offences on terrorism. Some Nigerians in their reaction believe that the federal government of Nigeria may not release IPOB leader despite the directive of the United Nations. Okay. Which, to be fair, is a very much fair point. But we're not necessarily sure, because UN is not necessarily an enforcement body, if that makes sense. What they're really there to do, on a very basic level from my understanding, is really to resolve disputes within countries, in the same continent, whatever dispute it is. It's more like it's like a warning system, if that makes sense. So if it's getting very extreme, pretty much very, very bad, then that's when they can start sanctioning, or they can start giving certain punishments. But to a very large extent, if the Nigerian government does not obey such a directive or an order, the worst, I don't think anything would come out of it, to be honest, because again, the UN is not threatening to do anything to Nigeria. I don't think they have the power to. Nigeria is part of the UN, and I think Nigeria would have to do something. Again, look at the NSAS protest. What happens to the Nigerian government? Nothing. So imagine. So if in the NSAS protest, the UN, all they probably could do was warn and say, please don't do this, blah, blah, blah. People were killed, and what did they do? Nothing. So in this case, it's sort of has less of relevance. So I don't think that would be happening. But, we have to see what the government says. It's not the first time that, they'll be given an order. But, again, it is the UN. Not that the UN is not a reputable body, but the consequences the UN would give aren't strong enough to make the country stay in line. So Aloy Jimako reposted what Bruce Fein stated on Twitter in regards to this. He says, I just received opinion by working group on arbitrary detention of UN Human Rights Council demanding immediate unconditional release of Nnamdi Kanu and reparations for several violations of internationally guaranteed rights by Nigerian and Kenyan governments. Stand by for full opinion. I hope they back it up with action and not just statement. Thank you, the legal team. That is true. My heart is filled with joy. Great news. But the question is, will the Nigerian government and their DSS listen to the authority? We all know they have a first class in being stubborn and going against the rules. Exactly. Even within Nigeria, we don't even respect our laws enough. The DSS has flouted court orders. It's actually uncountable at this point. So again, if there were real consequences, for example, sanctions, for example, ban on trade. So I think there's a way where you can, there's a 3-point strike system. It's warning, something else, and then sanctions and ban on trade and all that. So sanctions and ban on trade, that's like the last step. if I'm simplifying it. That's the last, okay, fine, you have really not listened. But the UN's reactions to, other pressing matters, for example, the NSAS protest, which you believe they'd go, head on, straight in, with proper consequences and holding people accountable, nothing happened. So it's really, again, at least we have it on paper that the UN at least has said that Nnamdi Kanu should be released. So again, evidence against the Nigerian government on still holding Nnamdi Kanu will be piled up against them, because how many orders have they flouted? They flouted several orders. So then, if you're to put this together, it then gives proper evidence to show that the Nigerian government really does not want to release this man, because how many orders, how many directives do they need, especially from international bodies? First comment, finally, God heard our secret prayers. Nigerian government has no choice, because the earth is of the Lord and fullness thereof. Can people for once read correctly? The announcer did not say a directive from UN. It was rather an opinion by a human right group. In any case, it is not part of the UN mandates to force the government of a sovereign nation to release, albeit unconditionally, a citizen on criminal trial. So you have to go back again. There is some extent or some sort of power that the UN will have, but it's not fully enforcing where they would. I don't think the UN can go over the constitution of a country. Yes, you can argue what the constitution of Nigeria is and how it has its loopholes and whatever, but it's still the constitution on paper, and so it is still the same constitution that you don't trust that is the basis for Nnamdi Kanu's arrest at the end of the day. So whether you agree with it or not, the UN it can't override, if that makes sense. And again, as I said, there's a 3-point system where all they can do, what they're there for is just to warn and say, in all simplicity, don't do this again. What's the punishment? Not anything serious. It's only, we're talking now, violation, probably going to take over somebody's land, killing other citizens, then it gets to that point. However, if you try to argue the NSAS protest, the UN didn't necessarily hold to account the Nigerian government, well, to the extent that Nigerians would have liked anyway. But put what you think about it in the comment section below. Do you believe the DSS will actually listen to the UN? Do not forget to like and subscribe.